interns and associates, and welcome back to another episode of the Cubicle Podcast. Today, we are joined by someone who proves that technology, creativity, and leadership doesn't have to exist in separate worlds. Samir Youssouf is a cybersecurity graduate student at the University of Nevada, and then a sensitive subject in Las Vegas, an inspiring digital forensic specialist, an award-winning student leader, photographer, designer, educator, and community builder. Obviously, there's a mouthful there, and we have a lot to talk about. Throughout his journey, Samir has worn multiple hats, from serving an international officer for Kalisha Deka and leading social media initiatives that have reached thousands of students, co-founding and later leading Cyber Clinic, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping small businesses strengthen their cybersecurity while giving students real-world experiences, which is great. How to apply your concepts outside the classroom. He's also interned with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's Forensic Laboratory, taught cybersecurity concepts to middle school and high school students, and documented countless events through his photography lens. What makes Samir's story especially fascinating is his ability to connect seemingly different passions, cybersecurity, digital design, leadership, education, and storytelling, into a mission focused on making technology safer and more accessible for others. So today we're going to talk about his path into cybersecurity, the lessons he's learned from leading organizations, the future of digital forensics, and how his creativity has helped shape his career along the way. So, that being said, Samir, welcome to the Cubicle Podcast, and it's such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, it's a pleasure. I was just like, obviously reading that, knew it was a mouthful, and knew that we had to have you on just based on the fact that like you just have such an insane background for just being so young and just still navigating and like figuring out the world. But it's amazing to like just have you on and to hear from your perspective and get someone who knows a lot about cybersecurity, because I actually didn't even like obviously know the aspect about you. So it's cool to like bring that aspect to the podcast and broaden their horizons a little bit. So I just want to thank you so much. Oh my God, so loud. Thank you so much for being on. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank
Yes.
you.
So let's start out. So growing up, what sparked your interest in technology and cybersecurity? Like, how did this all start?
So interesting enough, this may be crazy to hear, but when I was in fifth grade, the first thing that I thought of when someone asked the question of, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to know what my answer was? It was a dentist. A dentist. Right now, I would think that was crazy. Like, why did I think about that? But essentially, I guess for some reason, I thought maybe at the time what dentists do, like with teeth or like how they analyze and stuff, I thought was cool. Really quickly afterwards, I was like, yeah, no, that's not my thing at all. But I had to think about like as I was about to go into high school, I was thinking, okay, what do I like actually want to do? Like this is something I really need to think about. And then I thought about what I liked. I loved at the time, loved video games. I loved messing around with computers and technology and stuff like that. So I was like, let me do something with technology. What's the closest thing? Engineering. So when I went to my high school, it was a magnet school, so they had an engineering program. So I decided to go under there, start learning everything. It was pretty fun. We learned like 3D modeling, we did build some stuff, bridges, etc. And my classmates, it was great. And then I was like, all right, now I need to figure out where in engineering do I want to go to? And computers were something that I really liked. So I almost went to the aspect of, computer science, computer engineering. Then it was in my sophomore year of high school, a couple of my friends who was in my AP Computer Science Principles class actually came up and they're like, "Hey, we saw this cool thing called Cyber Patriot." For context, it's like a cyber competition that you can compete in within high school as high school students, and they have their own unique challenges where there's like a bunch of like errors, vulnerabilities, and you have to like fix everything. So he was showing me, he was like, "Hey, we don't have a chapter at our high school, but we were thinking of starting one. Do you want to join us?" And I thought, you know what? Like this seems interesting. Why not? So me and like three of us essentially started our Cyber Patriot chapter, and we did the annual competitions each year, and we would do pretty good on like the local level and stuff. As you get like in the higher level with like the state or even like national stuff, it does get pretty tough, and that's something that was pretty challenging for us throughout the years. And then we had some people join, and we passed it on eventually. But one of the things I really liked about it was working with everyone, and it was like my first exposure to cybersecurity. And I thought it was really cool because it was like something that was more talked about now, and it was something that I saw was very important and something that was still related to technology in some aspect. So it was like okay, now I know this is something that, I'm gonna dive in, especially when I get into college and stuff. The only issue is during when I was applying to go to UNLV, which is the school I go to now, they didn't have a cybersecurity bachelor's. So with that aspect, I was like, what's the closest thing? Ended up being I just chose computer engineering. Really quickly, right after the first semester, I switched to computer science. And I stuck with that for the rest of my bachelor's. Keep in mind, I was a class of 2020 person in high school, which means my first year of college was all online because of the pandemic. And I honestly, as I went through college and even joining the one cybersecurity organization that was there, which was Layer Zero, it was more of a technical one and they focused a lot on like online competitions. But that's where in 2021 I started, co-founding the cyber clinic, as you mentioned earlier. This was something that we wanted to start in because we wanted to combat two issues that we saw in the world: people who didn't have experience in cybersecurity, but also people or small businesses that needed that help and they can't afford hiring someone. So that was something that we started back then, and I stuck with the organization for 4 years straight. It was in October of 2021 when we first started. I actually was one of the people who helped with, the initial website, helping with a lot of the foundations, and the iconic Cyber Clinic logo itself was designed by yours truly. So it was really cool to be able to be involved in a lot of the early aspects, and even a lot of the people we were able to connect with locally, and even in some of the conferences we were able to attend to, really was able to help get people that experience, and a lot of students was able to really get involved and find their niche in there. Of course, I'm not part of the organization anymore. I stepped away and wanted to focus more on, as I'm finishing up my master's right now, in cybersecurity, and I wanted to focus more on getting my own experience later on and focusing on digital forensics because analyzing, different assets and evidence is something that I think interested me the most. Because cybersecurity is its own niche area, like engineering, where you kind of have to pick a specific little role. There's so many different ones that are over there. There was a lot of steps that I really took, but it was pretty fun finding that path. And it's kind of funny how I started with dentists and now I want to be a digital forensic specialist.
No, seriously, you have such a cool background, and it's amazing to hear just like how you've grown into this and like how, yeah, you started you wanted to be out of dentist, but then you really just like navigated and you found your way into cybersecurity and have made so much of success for yourself, especially like for being so young. And I'm just curious now, like for starting out with cybersecurity, do you think you would get back with like working for Cyber Clinic at all and kind of just like looking on that again? Like even though like you stopped kind of in that sense, like would you kind of like get back in that direction, like kind of working more for that organization, helping out small businesses? Or would you like to do like something else with cybersecurity and what you've been doing so far?
I think helping others is definitely something that really resonates with me a lot because, and outside of cybersecurity, I've done a lot of other aspects where I've tutored individuals before in the past. I've been a mentor to some people, and that's something that I've realized I actually enjoy, especially because being involved in CTSOs with high schools to this day, especially in DECA, is something that has allowed me to continue being involved with a lot of the younger generation. And I now see the importance of trying to make sure that they feel supported and they can hopefully grow to be as leaders like us, or if not better. So going back to your question, fortunately, the cyber clinic we originally started has evolved, and now we have the Nevada Institute of Cybersecurity, which is more of a little hub that is hopefully able to work more within the state to have its own security operations center, which is something that we've been thinking about wanting to have for a while now, since the state itself doesn't really have their own SOC little area. Some other states do, and that's something that we thought was pretty important to help, especially with any incidents in the future that may happen. So I think as an future alum, I don't want to lose touch of the local community I've grown with. It's something that I want to continue to help, regardless of what role I have in the future, because continuing to invest in the next generation is something that I hope a lot more people realize, because not only is it, helps them as young individuals, but also for ourselves, because maybe we may see someone who's a potential candidate or someone we may want to hire for wherever we work. So depending on where I end up, officially, working, wherever company or organization, I may find someone who could be a good fit that I want to maybe mentor or tutor in a sense.
No, that's very interesting. And what specific, are there any specific organizations or companies or that you would like to work for, like maybe in the postgrad of your master's? And if so, like what specific role would you like to do when it comes to working maybe with that organization or that company?
So a lot of the aspects that people go for is either one of two areas, either public or private sector. Now, personally, I actually want to focus more on the public sector, but I want to stay in Las Vegas. Las Vegas has been a really special home to me. I've grown up here my whole life, and seeing how much the community has built, I want to stay here and work over here and also stay with my family. And the reason I choose public sector is because personally, from what I've seen, there's a lot of these like state organizations like State of Nevada or City of Las Vegas or even the Las Vegas like Metropolitan Police Department. A lot of those areas have specific like IT or cyber departments that I think or have roles that interest me personally. Plus, I feel like public sector is known for having like a lot more stability. I know in the private sector, I've seen so many cases where a lot of my friends have gotten hired at really good paying jobs, and then you never know when you get laid off. And it happens a lot in the private sector with like corporations, whether it's with Google or many other like big tech companies. And that's something that is very unfortunate. So with some of the public sector areas, like there's areas where they have like a digital forensics lab in some places. And being an analyst under there is something that I want to hopefully reach. Now, of course, one of the cool things about public sector is even if you don't start in that role right away, starting with any maybe other tech role like, help desk or, IT technician, stuff like that, it's still a good start because you still get to know the community or the hub or the environment that you're going to be working with. And then eventually, as you stay there for a few years, you can, they'll be able to maybe recommend you to maybe a different department that you can jump around. And that's something that I think is really cool because not only are you able to still develop yourself and then go up in the ladder, but at the same time, you still stick with that kind of environment and the people that you're continuing to work with for years and years to come.
I see. No, that's very cool. That's very interesting because I actually did not know that about like the instability with working like in the private sector versus the public sector. And so you kind of did say before it was like a couple to like about a few years, but so let's just say like if you didn't get that specific role that you wanted and you start like yeah anywhere like IT or just anywhere within that sector that they'll offer for a job position, it would be an easy transition to go from like one job to another, especially if like you don't learn that like specific role, then like let's just say you don't get that exact role that you want, you learn that role first. Is it like complicated to kind of learn like those roles, or they are they kind of just all like intertwined and they're like easy to learn, especially throughout your education process and throughout just like all the other experiences that you had before? These are just all hypothetical, but I'm just curious.
No, I think it's a good point to bring up too, because it does make you wonder, like, where, like, how desperate would you want to be to just get into said company or, entity, like, just to even get in there. And it's why, obviously stuff like the police departments or like the state have, there are all kinds of departments besides just their IT team or cyber team. And of course, a lot of that's why in my aspects focusing more on just a tech side, cybersecurity falls under a lot of different umbrellas. A lot of people think that cybersecurity is just technical stuff, IT or like computer stuff or whatever. There's a lot more to that because there's areas where it focuses a lot on, social aspects too. People forget like stuff like social engineering and like how you talk to people and how you like project or like emphasize or even like deliver the information that you have is more important aspect in cybersecurity than people realize. As a matter of fact, a lot of employers, when they're looking at candidates, in some cases, a lot of times they'll focus more on whether or not you know how to like deliver and be able to tell someone or explain to someone certain pieces of evidence or information in a way that they can understand, despite not being as proficient in cybersecurity or in technology in general as you are. Because if you're able to articulate in that way, or even in documentation, that's worth more than just being able to know how to use a tool or know how to like understand every single technical aspect that you can think of. Because at the end of the day, you know, anything you're working for, I mean, it's a business. And a lot of times when you're talking with board of directors or CEOs and stuff like that on issues or recommendations on what they should do to increase their security, all they really are going to really think about is, well, how is this going to affect us financially? And are we still going to be able to make money from this? And, is this something, why should we care about this? Because a lot of times, if you can't articulate it well, they're not going to care. And then when something does happen, they're going to try to put the blame on you, even though you did explain it. But the issue is that you didn't explain it the right way. And that's one aspect that I think a lot of people forget. So going back to the aspect of whether or not it's hard to maybe like learn like based off the role you start at. It's why in public sector, I feel like they give you more opportunity to develop yourself, especially if you build a good network with those people. That's why, socializing and networking with people in general, whether at conferences or even anywhere you go, is something that I always stress so much personally for myself and for others too, because you never know what type of opportunities you get. And it applies even when you do get a job, because you're going to be working with people regardless. You're not just going to be in your own little, I dare say this, cubicle. Um, but eventually, people are going to be reaching out. They're going to ask you for help, or they're going to be like, hey, can you help me with this? Or you're going to need help from other people. Especially in cybersecurity, teamwork is probably one of the most important things that you will ever see. And if you don't have that, good luck if you're trying to be as desirable of a candidate for a job.
Oh no, I bet. Yeah, it does seem like it could be a very collaborative industry. I think every industry, in a sense, can be very collaborative, but it definitely seems like cybersecurity and working in a private or public sector, you have to collaborate and have that level of just bonding and connecting together. And kind of going along with that question, in order to have success within even cybersecurity, other than like you said, like collaborating, communication, teamwork, what are some other skills, whether they're soft or they're hard skills, or they're just skills that are very like related and specialized for cybersecurity that you need to have in order to be successful, and that can be up to your interpretation of success?
That's a good point because there's a couple ways you can answer this. So let's say if we're talking about if you had a certain amount of time and you had to focus on one side, either soft skills or hard skills, soft skills was probably what I would focus on first because there are companies and areas where if you get lucky, they will usually be willing to help train a little bit to make sure you understand the hard or technical skills. But you can't train soft skills at all. That's something that you have to develop from yourself. And if you don't have that, a lot of times those technical or hard skills probably won't mean much. Now, if we're going to the aspects of, what skills in cybersecurity, it varies a lot in which area. Now, a lot of times cybersecurity is split into two areas, red team, blue team. Red team is more of the offensive type of roles, so penetration testing or more of the offensive aspect of like testing a lot of the security to make sure like, well, let's see if I can get in this and see if you actually, set up everything properly. Now, the blue team is the opposite. It's more of the defensive side. Most of the roles that are needed right nowadays is on the blue team. So a lot of times if you're looking for jobs and stuff, it's more common in that aspect. There is a third, which is purple team, and really, I mean, as you can guess, it's just a mix of both. Because at the end of the day, having an understanding of both sides is important, especially if you're trying to understand the attacker's perspective and what their predictions or what they may try to do next if, let's say, an incident happens or if you're analyzing evidence in that aspect. Now, for example, stuff like whether you're doing forensics or doing instant response, maybe there are certain tools that sometimes some companies may use or may ask you if you're proficient in. Other th ways is, especially like I mentioned, documentation is a big aspect. Um, Knowing how to understand even just like basic like protocols or different ports or like a lot of the basic base level of cybersecurity. There are some technical aspects that you should know no matter what. And that's where certifications comes into play because there's a lot of certifications now related in cybersecurity at this point, but there's a lot of baseline ones like Security Plus. Network Plus and A Plus are more of the lower level and they focus more on different aspects in technology. But Security Plus is always one you'll hear a lot of people be like, you should probably start here. And then from there, once you do that, there's probably a diagram, I kid you not, where there's a website, if when you open it, there's a ton, and I mean a ton of different certifications of all kinds of levels, from beginner level to areas where you need experience in order to take the certification and so on. So a lot of the big ones are the ones that, unfortunately, they also cost a lot of money too. But it's ones where it's like if you have this experience and you pass the exam or whatever, this is ones they're ones that a lot of people take notice of, or like companies will actually like recognize and be like, oh, this we want to look into this person. But certifications or experience or education alone is not enough. You have to have a good mixture of all three. Now, if I had to tell you, well, what if I can only focus on one of those three? What is the most important? Experience is the most important thing. Like, I can't stress enough how much companies will prioritize experience over even like if you have a bachelor's or maybe even a master's in some cases. Because a lot of times they care about how practical you are and how much you're able to do hands-on and like right in the moment. Because a lot of times they'll probably test you too and ask you questions like, well, let's say you were in this scenario. What's your next steps? What would you do in this case if this happened? Because there's a lot of spontaneous stuff that can happen. And one thing I like about our master's program that I'm doing right now at UNLV is some of our classes focus on that. We have classes I took recently where we actually were put into like actual incident risk scenarios that happened where someone breached in or someone got a like a ransomware and stuff like that, and we had to look after on the aftermath and see, okay, what do we can we find? We have to learn how to use the tools and also learn how to work together as a team and see, all right, did you find this? I found this. How can we connect these together? How can we make a timeline and document, okay, what actually happened from start to finish? How did the attacker get in? And what's the proof of that? Like there's so many other different things that, and it takes being in that process to really understand it. Like there's only so much you can learn from just simply looking at watching a video or reading a textbook for the most part. So that's something I think that also just fascinates me because it makes it very interesting for people to learn.
Yeah, no, I bet. No, that's so interesting. And I love that you like separate the fact that there's like different teams and different like skills and like things that you have to hone together and having that experience to really help yourself stand out in cybersecurity by being able to apply those real life skills into and just like what you learn through these experiences, which I think is so interesting. And are there any like times where you feel like you're always learning or you feel challenged with being in cybersecurity? And what are those like scenarios or situations for you? And like how do you kind of handle it and how do you learn and go about those challenges and those maybe those snags on the road? Like I'm curious to hear because there's probably plenty of it, I'm sure, plenty of red tape.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like cybersecurity is one of those fields where no matter how knowledgeable or experienced you are, you're always going to learn things every day, no matter what, because things are evolving, things are changing. I mean, now thanks to AI, that throws so many things out the window. Now there's a whole different aspect that we have to learn now, especially because now a lot of people are trying to even recommend that people who have a good understanding of these large language models and how they work, because in the case that AI is involved in certain areas, we have to understand how it works. And understanding how it works will allow us to know how to combat it or how to find solutions to it as well. Now, in regards of kind of the challenges with scenarios. Now, there are a lot of resources, fortunately, that allow us to keep up to date with a lot of the news and what goes on, whether it's incidents that's happened across the world or locally, or even new updates on certain tools or operating systems and what to keep in mind and how it affects security, or even on our phones, stuff like that. And then even I've talked with like professors who have quite a lot of experience, like years and years, and who are teachers and doing some of our classes. And even for them, they're always telling us some very interesting stories in their jobs and what they've learned, or even just the way people have like expressed or like they've worked with them and kind of how they act. Even like I mentioned earlier about spontaneous moments, that's something that you can't predict so much where you never know if there's a new kind of spontaneous moment that you just never experienced before. And some of our professors have told us some very interesting stories, especially if when an incident happens, a lot of times you're working with, not only board of directors or just the tech team, but also like lawyers too. A lot of people forget that law gets very involved when it comes to this aspect because it's like, okay, is there a warrant to get certain information or to like unlock certain devices? Or is like what do we have to do in this like moment? Like we only have so much time, especially if an incident is still like happening at that moment and you're dealing with it. A lot of times you'll feel a lot of like pressure and stress because you only have so much time, but you also have to be calm. Being calm and collected and really utilizing your time are like, okay, we only have so much time. This is happening right now. What should we do next? What's the best course of action? And if you being irrational about it is what causes a lot of massive mistakes, especially if like it's like, do we pay this ransom? Do we try to go around it? Like what do we do about our information? How many other people are connected with us that affect us as well, especially with third party. Like there's so many things that go into this. You can honestly go all day talking about like a lot of the aspects that go into cybersecurity or just things that happen nowadays. But I think the one thing to keep in mind is there's always ways to learn about it. And if you're someone that wants to keep up with cybersecurity, find there's certain websites that you can look up to um, like constantly keep up with news, or even just look up cybersecurity stories every now and then, just see, what's going on, or just practicing with different tools. There's a lot of websites, fortunately, that help people get started in cyber, or a lot of content creators too. There's quite a few YouTubers who actually like have videos that where they try to don't like explain things in better detail to where people can understand it, especially if people are coming from we actually have students from our master's program where they come from like journalism or political science. So for a lot of them, technology is kind of something that they aren't as proficient in as people who come from computer science and stuff like that. So it's really intriguing to see a lot of people's perspectives when they see certain things because the way they see it could be a perspective that actually could be in our favor.
Wait, that's so interesting though. That is actually like that's cool because it's like I was like wondering that too. Like you kind of answered one of my questions, like how do you actually like get involved and like start with like learning this? And it does seem like you kind of have to be proactive yourself by looking things up on social media and keeping up with the news online and specifically like find sources and websites and articles and just any like information that you can like get about the industry just seems like it's so crucial. So that's actually amazing that it's like you do have to be proactive in a sense. And if you are interested, that's the best way to get started. And then making those connections and networking and at different events or and find those events, how to get involved there. So I feel like that's like very interesting that you did bring up that point. I also liked up that you bring up the point before about AI.
Mhm.
And as we talk about AI like all the time, I feel like everyone does, and especially how I'm sure it's very impactful towards the cybersecurity industry and sector. Do you have any concerns regarding how AI might be involved within your job? Like, do you think it's going to affect your workload, affect maybe receiving a job, or do you think it's going to be helpful? Like, what's your take on AI with all this?
It's very interesting because we have been asked this before, and I've seen a lot of various responses from people of like people who are one-sided where they're like, we gotta, ban AI. We don't want it, and like we don't want to use it at all. There's people who are very proactive for it, where they're like, AI can be very useful. We can use it for all these kinds of things. It'll make our life so much easier. But my aspect is when it comes to cyber. I've seen so at certain conferences and stuff, I've seen different cybersecurity companies utilize AI in certain ways. Some of them have done it very interesting aspects where the idea and the best way to go about it is being able to balance not only making sure the AI model you're using is something that can give, as accurate of information as possible when it comes to what you're trying to get out of it or what you're trying to ask it. And then also, what kind of information are you feeding it? Is it information that could potentially be sensitive? And if so, can you trust that whoever the company that is managing the AI model is not going to get breached or use that to try to recycle it into that AI model itself? or even if it's your own AI model that you create yourself, then there's an aspect where if it's still accurate. Not only that, there's a lot of law and policy that goes into aspect in cybersecurity. And when AI is involved, it makes things a lot more complicated because now you got to set those boundaries. When and where can we or where we should not use AI at all? And if so, where do we draw that line? That line has to be extremely clear, not just for AI, but even in general. That's why cybersecurity policies or cyber law is something that honestly needs to be focused on a lot more now, especially if not just in the state level, but especially in the federal level too. Because now we're dealing with information and certain aspects people are utilizing AI with. And there's a lot of people that just don't understand how powerful it can be. And that's what makes it very dangerous. That's why there's people out there who like just want to ban it because they're like, I don't want that risk. I don't want like I just don't want to use it at all because who knows like what's gonna happen. And there's some companies that are also investing too much into AI to the point where, I mean, not just in cybersecurity, for crying out loud, it's literally affecting one of the favorite aspects that's affecting that I've heard a lot of people talk about is the video game industry. And the reason I say this is because now there's certain computer parts that they're utilizing aspects where they're trying to implement AI into the mix where it can help with, better, game experience or something like that. But it honestly not only makes it worse, but it also has people just cheating the system in a sense where they're trying to hopefully my internet is not stable. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is AI can be very dangerous, but it also can be very useful. And I think finding that middle ground and balance is the key. And I think it's just very hard to determine because it's not one size fits all. So it's how do you define it for whether you're a company and how do you also define it for yourself?
Very interesting, I have to say, because I was very curious to see like how it would and then how it mixes with legislation and it affects jobs and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I do think that it should definitely managed more in cyber law.
Nah.
Okay, perfect. We are back in biz. Awesome. So just give me a second. I'm like jogging my memory for a second from like where we kind of started. So we talked a little bit about AI and so I think where do we
Trying to
want to
figure
go?
out.
I know. Where are we going from here? I'm like blanking. It's already been like a long time.
We focused a
Um,
lot on the cybersecurity aspect.
oh yeah. How about we talk about that? So, thank you for mentioning that. I was so to talk more about like cyber law, where do you think like there'll be a point where legislation, whether it's state or if it's federal, like they will be able to really like mandate more? Because we obviously know AI still has time to grow and to expand, and it's going to continuously grow and expand. When do you think that there like more legislation is going to take place within cyber law in regards to AI? Like, what's your predictions on that? Like the time.
Ooh. So I guess here's the challenging part about it is unfortunately there's two issues that I've seen, and I guess depending on how fast they get resolved is also going to determine its growth. One, unfortunately, there we have people who are in legislation who've been there for so many years, where they're not as technology literate to like, or they don't understand the AI that much, to where they don't see the how powerful and how dangerous it can be. So, for them, passing legislation or law or policies related to that isn't their priority unless someone shows that to them. They're like, oh, hold on, maybe I need to think about this. The other issue is that, unlike, the internet, we know the internet, is very, fast when it comes to like its growth and changing. But AI seems to grow even faster than that. So unless we're taking steps to constantly try to like combat this and try to develop policy in order to keep up and make sure that it's actually effective, we have to keep up with that speed. And unfortunately, I think we're at a point where we're definitely falling behind. And a lot of times, people or corporations within themselves have to take their own initiative to make sure that no one abuses it in a way where it becomes dangerous for themselves and for everyone around them because it only takes one of the lessons I actually like to teach, and I've done this actually in two different workshops. Funny enough, it was actually at a FBLA state conference and a DECA state conference. What I taught was did a little game with like related to cybersecurity with some cards on like trying to showcase like red team versus blue team. one of the things I tried to teach is that in the reality, for if you're on the blue team side, setting up, all the settings and protocols and defenses, you have to always make sure you're constantly successful in defending yourself and your company and making sure no one gets in. But that has to be every single time. For the offense side, especially for those who have malicious intent, it only takes them one time. If they get in, that like destroys you so much. And sure, of course, there are some people who have backup plans, who have insurance. Maybe their information is protected in a certain way where the damage is mitigated. That is, while that can be good, there's still damage at the end of the day. And that's where people don't realize how stressful it is to make sure that that one chance that the offense or the, I guess, opposing side gets is something that, you know, as much as we don't want it to happen, it's going to happen. So it's like, how do we prepare for that? As a matter of fact, some like even a lot of cases, it's a matter of also like seeing whether or not people who, face certain breaches or incidents, a lot of times it could be someone who's trying to play mind games in order to take advantage of maybe a recent event. An example of this is actually, I'm not sure if this may have affected you guys too, but as students, do you remember when Canvas was taken down recently or wasn't usable?
Wait,
Web Campus, do you remember? This happened, I think, like a month ago or
wait,
so.
Canvas? Is that what you guys' version of Brightspace? Because we just use like Brightspace. Maybe that's because
Okay, so
Canvas
maybe it
hasn't.
didn't affect you guys. Okay,
Okay,
interesting.
probably not. Because
As
we use Brightspace for FIT. So I think like other
okay,
schools nationwide will probably use like Canvas, for example.
yeah,
So okay, so yeah, so it's like
okay.
so you guys were affected.
Yeah, so a lot of schools like ours used Web Campus for our classes and stuff, and that was not usable. And we found out one of the days where a group claiming to be called Shiny Hunters pretty much caused it to be unusable for all the students as they claimed to have, like essentially they were trying to send a sort of ransomware. And they claimed that they had all the information locked up and they wanted uh like the factory or whatever or the people higher up to pay them in order to give back. Usually a lot of this is a trick. And the interesting part you have to keep in mind, and this was an example of this, where a lot of times when a pop-up like that happens, it could be one of two things. One, maybe it's the actual group themselves and they're actually, going after, whoever it may be, whether it's like schools and such. Or sometimes it could be a fake individual where they try to use a iconic group's name to try to scare people. Fear is a big part that convinces people in order to do or make a choice that maybe they normally wouldn't do. And that's a challenge that a lot of times we have to analyze and figure out when it happens in order to decide whether or not a ransom is paid or not. Because at the end of the day, when you ask people where it's like, if you get hit with a ransom yourself, do you pay it or not? And most people, they might just default and say, of course I'm not going to pay it. That's crazy. That's a trap. But you'd be surprised where in not every situation you would pay or not every situation you wouldn't pay because it's very tricky. It's not a one size fits all thing, like I mentioned earlier. It's based on the scenario and aspect because when you hear other news of like companies who've gotten attacked before, some of them have paid the ransom and they have different reasons of it. Some companies wanted to try to hide it so that way it's not as noticeable because they know that if people find out that you just got breached, people are going to be worried about trusting you as a company a lot of times. But there's also the aspect where if you try to hide it and then people find out afterwards, now it's showing that you're not as transparent and you're even less trusting than ever. So there's so many factors that go into this. And it makes it even more challenging, especially if, like, even when you do have policy and stuff, it only takes one person to not listen to it or to not pay attention and not care. And they screw up something, that affects all of you. And now you have to, either fire, even if you fire them or something, now you got to fix the damages. And that's where culture is a very important aspect in the companies. I mean, we all know that company culture is, very important to keep people engaged, keep people wanting to stay in the company or organization. But in cybersecurity, it's even more important because it allows people to have a better understanding of why we have to follow all these rules, even though it may be annoying or to be like, there's so many steps. Like, do we really have to do this? And it's like we have to remind ourselves through whether it's training or just taught like reminders or communicating about like this is why we're doing this all the time. Like we don't want this to happen. And we've seen this happen. And that's where we have to remind ourselves. So yeah, it's probably a hassle to have to do two-step verification. It's probably a hassle to have to, not write down your passwords. But at the end of the day, it's something that you'll thank yourself in the future.
Oh, I bet for sure. Yeah, no, you have to have like verification and security and background check, especially with how crazy our world is today with stealing people's information and just knowing that like don't tell anybody like anything if you can about like your identity and like anything regarding passwords. Like, because it's just like unsafe. Or what I have learned before is to change your passwords. And it's
Yes.
like, yeah, it's like, do you have, and actually, I think this is one the question I kind of have, like, do you have any advice for how to kind of prevent like any like data breaches or situations where going to maybe get like information stolen, which can happen in certain industries or beyond, or like how do you best go about like combating against like people hacking and people kind of like stealing people's like, information, which could be damaging to a company or someone individual.
So if we're thinking more on an individual perspective on how we protect ourselves, a lot of it just starts like you have to start just from the ground up, honestly. Like before, it used to be just like as long as you had a strong password, you're good, right? Now, in these recent, with how advanced and how smart like hackers are being now, especially like with AI and stuff, now it's like password alone isn't enough. Because someone can get that, and even if it is a complex, if someone does get that in a data breach, now you're screwed. So that's why like now two-step verification or like, just any kind of authentication in addition to your password is almost now a standard. There's a reason why you see so many apps or logins you have where the company will try to almost recommend or even force you to implement some kind of authentication, whether it's using your phone number, whether it's using, there's a lot of authentication apps now where you utilize those to, send a code or something like that. Even especially like Gmail or Zoom or um, even web campus. Like for our school, it's actually required for us to use Okta as an authentication app, and that's actually something you have to use now. Like every single student, every single faculty member, every time they log in, they have to have that. Otherwise, they will not have access. That was something that we actually used, and there's probably other campuses who do that now as well because they don't want a case where if their campus gets breached, the important aspect is, well, what's going to happen? Does this affect like regarding our students' information? And they don't want to have that risk. So it's like because of how much of a standard it is, even just so many different apps. I mean, I could name them all kinds, like Steam, Discord, all kinds of messaging apps, YouTube. Like you can probably think of any company and they probably have implemented. And if they haven't, that's probably a big concern and something that I would be very, very worried about. So it's really something to think about. I mean, authentication is one aspect of protecting yourself. Another thing is also just like other basic practices, whether it's changing your password every couple months, making sure you're not sharing your password with someone, or even writing it down, or even like even if you put it in like your notes app and stuff, it's still in clear text. If it's not like encrypted in some aspect and someone gets your phone or something, you're probably screwed. And you don't want that, whether it's for yourself or for your family members. That's another thing too. Like make sure you educate your family members too, especially those who maybe aren't as technology like advanced in regards of usage of it. Because I mean I do it all the time with my family, making sure that they're staying protected and they're not doing anything that may put them in jeopardy as well. So there's a couple basic practices that you could definitely utilize. The only issue is, as simple as you may think these practices are, you'd be surprised about the amount of people who just don't follow them because they either don't care, they don't see the importance of it, or they're just like, "Oh, I'll do it later," and then they wait until it's too late.
I see. Gotcha. No, that's good advice. I definitely will take you up on that, especially knowing my parents. Like, you're going to need some cybersecurity help, that's for sure. And to make sure that everything's tidy in that system. I definitely think that's definitely going to be a way to point at that. And then also just all the other like tips and suggestions that you had as well. Because you have to protect yourselves to prevent like any issues individually for ourselves and how to combat against, and how to identify certain issues, whether it's on any form of communication or on our digital platforms that we use every day for whether it's personal, for business, or beyond. How do we best protect ourselves? And it all starts with obviously it's great that the apps have their own implementations of making sure that like we're verified and just all other things, but then also just with ourselves and like how we do things every day too. So it's just always like that aspect as well, which I think is very interesting. And I kind of touched on this for a second. So obviously, you've had a lot of experience with DECA as being a former vice president, right?
Hmm.
And have had so many different like interesting things regarding your experience and your background with being a part of DECA. So my question is, has DECA really helped you and just all the other competitions and networking events and conferences that you've been to and volunteering still at? Has um has it been helpful to you regarding navigating your career, helping you kind of build up your skills? And how so? I'm curious. I know it's a loaded question, but
I'm glad you asked that because people do wonder when they realize how long I've been in, which for context, being in DECA for 10 years is not something you see every day. And people always wonder, Samir, why'd you stay so long? Like, what benefit did you get from it? Especially when people realize that I'm like a cybersecurity major or want to do that. And they're like, how does that play in a role at all? And I'm gonna tell you right now. And this doesn't just go into the aspect of like when I first started, I could barely do public speaking for the life of me, like speeches or anything like that. I sucked at so much. And I even though I was like hyperactive, I wasn't really as much of an extrovert as people think I was. But one of the things that DECA has helped me so much that actually has played a vital role is to put in simple terms, is exactly what I mentioned is so important in cybersecurity. Soft skills. A lot of that is where DECA came as or complemented my main career. That's why I stayed in it for so long, even when going to the college and stuff, because while sure I wanted to focus on, being part of cyber organizations or going more technical and stuff, I couldn't forget the aspect of understanding, how to properly communicate that, how to present myself in a better way, and also how to get better at just socializing and talking to people and asking the right questions. One of the things that makes me enjoy DECA so much is it's also where I learned to understand the importance of helping others. Something that I don't see this all the time, and I wish more people recognize this, but something that I mentioned, and I actually mentioned this during my final speech when I was running for international vice president. And I mentioned a time where I had my high school state conference in my last high school year. This was in 2020 in Nevada. And this was the one year where I became a state finalist for the very first time. The previous years, I didn't make it that far, unfortunately. And the only reason I made it that far was because there was a guy who I was waiting in when we were waiting for our event. And we were talking, and he gave me some really good advice on some creative way he used scratch paper. And he was telling me about it. And he was like, you should try something like this. Maybe this will help. Keep in mind, I was doing marketing communications, and which is like one of the most popular events. Everyone's like doing it. So it's very challenging to even make it that far. So I was thinking, like in my head, maybe I should take it up like his advice. So I was doing my second role play, and I decided, fold it up a little bit, try to use it as some kind of prop. I do my presentation and everything. The judge seemed really interested. I'm like, okay, maybe this worked. I come to find out that I got a 99 on that role play. And when it came to awards, my second role play, I got first place in, and I became a state finalist. This is great, you might be thinking. There's one issue with this. The person who gave me this advice, I never exchanged any type of contact with them. because of this, I never got a chance to actually thank them. And to this day, I don't remember his name at all. The reason why was an issue is because this actually hurt me a lot because it made me realize that I could never properly thank him for helping me because I believe he was in the same event as I was. And despite that, he still gave me that advice. He could have easily gatekept that and been like, nah, I want to win this. I'm not gonna tell him anything. But it was because of that moment that, as I transitioned from high school to college, it I shifted a little bit in my perspective of how I wanted to approach DECA from now on. And it was the aspect of, as I'm learning and as I want to learn myself, not only do I want to make sure I learn from others as I'm connecting and growing and stuff, but I want to also be someone who helps others too. Because I knew at some point I was going to get into a position where I was going to be someone who I guess you could call, I guess, a veteran at this point in DECA because of how long I've been. But I understand that for other people, there's going to be so many people who are just joining for the first time. And they're probably going to be a little nervous or don't know what to do, like how I was, which is why I shifted my perspective to be more of someone who can help be more of a support system and help people get a very good start into getting involved in an organization like this, especially because I know some people aren't as fortunate to have maybe a lot of people to help them. And if I can at least help them even just a little bit, then hopefully that can go a long way. And that's why whenever I go to conferences, anything like that, um, as much as, I hang out with my own chapter, I've always focused a lot on talking with other states and other chapters and why I enjoy it so much, and then trying to connect them with my state people as well because I want them to also grow and not be too shy when it comes to talking with people, especially like you and your FIT chapter as well. As a matter of fact, I think your FIT chapter I've known for a couple of years, and Adina was probably one of the first ones I actually met. And since then, I've been able to meet all of you guys. Actually, I think Adina was the one that connected me with you to begin with. So I thank her for that as well. And it's because of that aspect where being helpful to others, I think is why I stayed in DECA for so much. Because even though I was trying to help others, I was still learning from those same people as well. And because they all have various perspectives, and it's something that you learn from wherever you go, regardless of whether they're in cyber, they're in political science, they're doing business, marketing, fashion, whatever it may be. It's important to also not be too cocky in your own knowledge and realize that you can learn a thing or two from others. Now, unfortunately, I wish more people would learn that aspect of being more humble when it comes to networking and stuff. Because as much as I want to say that there are a lot of people I've met like you guys who are humble, unfortunately, not everyone is. And sometimes I try to remind people that, you know, it's okay to not always be the best at everything. And that when things don't go your way, for example, even in competition, I was never someone who excelled all the time. I've never gotten deck of glass to this day. And that's okay because I've realized that competition isn't everything. It's a matter of what you take from it. If you ever come in some kind of blockage or stumble upon a wall, whenever you're doing anything or things don't go the way you want it to, instead of kind of pouting or getting upset at other people about it, the thing I always like to ask myself is, what is the next step moving forward? What can I do with what just happened and make the most of it? I also did the same exact thing when I ran for executive office because I actually ran for president at the time. And this was a time period where I was very well connected with a lot of members. And people thought, oh yeah, you have a good chance of winning. But even I understood when getting to know my other candidates, I saw the potential and the strengths and weaknesses they had. And because of that, I had an acceptance where I could see myself not getting the president position. And that's okay because these people actually have very unique perspectives. And I actually really want to work with these people. And if one of them gets president, I'm completely fine with that. And that's exactly what happened. I ended up the VP instead, but because of the great team I had and how we were able to really understand each other, they gave me the opportunity to do what I do best. I handled a lot of the marketing side. I was lead for a lot of our social media stuff. I helped with some photography for our group as well. And they didn't try to like shut me down or limit that. They understood that. They're like, we're gonna trust you with this. If you need any help in this aspect, we'll help you with that. And I did the same for them too. It's that trust aspect. And being humble in that, despite things not going well back then, seeing how it grew and how it ended up being an amazing experience, it's something that I wish hopefully more people will realize happens. They won't realize it right away because it hasn't happened yet. But once they actually see an experience, they're like, wow, maybe I'm very grateful that happened. Maybe it was a good thing. So I guess that's one way to sum it up.
Yeah, no, you summed it up perfectly in a nutshell. No, I think that's really true. And I love that you pointed out humility is such an important thing because I think that like great, like, it's such a great quality to have. I really do think it is. Like I think it's so it can take away from anybody any experience. I think just modesty and just kindness and just humility and just being, being open to learning, being curious, always being a sponge, taking information and it's learning about people, knowing how to read people, taking that from others in every aspect of your life is so crucial. So I'm so glad that you pointed out. So unfortunately, I we could probably talk all day, but sadly, I do actually have to close out the pod, and I would love for you to answer this question because I know you're going to give such great advice. You can give one or multiple pieces of advice up to your interpretation on just how to get into cybersecurity, how to live life like yourself. What advice would you give?
Ooh, because there's a couple that I've definitely learned in my throughout my years, and it's probably advice I'm still trying to take also to this day. But I think I'll emphasize more on the aspect of being on that humility aspect because, and the reason I think it's probably one of the most important pieces of advice that I want to give, no matter what you're doing, regardless of what industry, is because humility comes a very long way. And the issue that I've seen is I've seen people who fail to practice this, and the cost of not doing that actually damages you as an individual and those around you more than you realized. Because by not practicing humility creates jealousy. That jealousy creates enemies. And those enemies end up going against you, affects you and those around you, your environment, your family, and also affects your future of how people will perceive you. Because if you have that bad, perspective that people see of you because you get jealous over one small thing or you let something control you, that, stays with you for a long time and it's very hard to shake off because it goes back to the aspect of also having just that first impression. And when I see this sometimes of people, and there's people who I've told this advice to as well, and unfortunately, not everyone takes it seriously. And, at that point, it's kind of hard. It's more, if someone doesn't take it seriously, it's more to the point where now they have to, learn it the hard way. So, as hard as it may seem to kind of accept and try to figure like a solution, like move on from what happens to you, it's it's a very hard thing, but once you do it, you become very grateful for it. It's something I've had to learn consecutively. And the reason I like to give this advice and I feel like I'm able to is because I feel like I'm a person who has gone through a lot of failures and things that didn't go well. As much as people, want to say about like, my experience and how much I've done in DECA, there's a lot of things that didn't go well throughout my years. And it's only because of those that I'm able to get to where I am now, whether it's projects we've done that maybe didn't perform as well, new ideas that maybe did decent but could have done better. Maybe attendance wasn't as good. Maybe certain designs I made before and looking back now, maybe they could look better, so on and so forth. Or even just how you grow and how you talk to people. That can always be improved as well. So hopefully anyone who watches this really think about that humility aspect and know that it's not easy. It can be a challenge and you may be very tempted to get upset or try to blame someone, but at the end of the day, it's only you that can control you. You can't really control other people. So how are you going to make the most of the situation that you're in? And how are you going to be a good example to where you can be a leader that other people can appreciate and look up to, and something that when you look back years out later, you're going to be grateful that you made those choices.
No, that's really good advice. I love that. That was actually very different from I feel like a lot of the advice that we've had before. So I'm honestly really glad that you touched on that because I feel like that's just like that's a ticket and it's so relatable to your background and your experiences. So I really do think it's like, you know what, no matter how many times you fail, you learn. And that's okay. And
Exactly.
it's how you go from there and you build yourself up so you can find your own level and your own version of your own success. And that looks different for everyone. And it's always something that's a curious moment for us. It's like, okay, how can we find out our successes and how can we get up to that level? And we're all gonna get there. We're like I say, I feel like I said this in a lot of podcasts too. We're all climbing up a mountain. We're just going on different sides and we're taking different strategies and ways to get up. And that's really how it's finding your own version of success and how you navigate and find that own version of your success within you. And that's so
Exactly.
important. Exactly. Clock it. And anyway, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today on the podcast. I know everyone that's obsessed with cybersecurity is like going crazy right now. And or there will be once they're listening in and tuning in. So I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. And this concludes this episode of the Typical Podcast. I was joined here today by Samir. Hope you guys enjoyed and stay tuned for the next episode for all is said. Thank you.
Thank you for having
Bye.
me.
Yes.